Hello and welcome to the Money Marketing Podcast. I'm Kimberly Dondo, and I am joined once again by our amazing editorial team, or part of our amazing editorial team.
The most amazing part of our editorial team.
Absolutely.
I am not going to pick favorites. So I will let you guys introduce yourselves and then we can get into the meat of the podcast.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tom Brown. I'm editor of Money Marketing.
And I am Lois Vallely, chief reporter.
Okay, thank you guys for joining me. And June was a glorious month, as it always is, because it is my birthday month. The same way that you love May because it's yours, Lois, I love June. But I think it was a pretty great month. So diving into that, what stood out for you in June?
You nearly said May then.
I did.
I don't remember May, so we'll have to go with June. Shall I go first, as I'm going to talk about the cover feature, which we ran in June, which I didn't actually write.
Mm-hmm.
But
No,
Amanda did talk a little bit about it in the last podcast, so yeah.
Well, I won't do as good a job as her at talking about it, but I'm going to try. Amazing cover feature by Amanda, as always, with her features. It went into real depth on the independence of advisors. So obviously independence has quite sort of positive connotations, as Amanda lays out in the intro. But it also, in financial advice, it has a regulatory meaning, as in independent financial advisor, compared with restricted financial advisor. And apparently, according to Amanda, which I didn't know, the first mention of like an independent financial advisor was to existence through the Financial Services Act in 1986, so quite a long time ago. But the actual like modern day definition started after RDR in 2012. So Amanda's feature was looking at whether advisors can be truly, genuinely independent, because obviously, I think I've said in other articles on other things, like unconscious bias is always going to be there and it's kind of impossible to escape. So is it possible for an advisor to actually be independent? And obviously Amanda spoke to a lot of people, put across quite a few different opinions on this. And one point I found particularly interesting was obviously it used to be a big deal to be like a independent financial advisor and offer whole of market advice. I'm doing air quotes there. You can't see. But now that we've moved away from this focus on product sales in financial advice and more towards this whole sort of idea of holistic financial planning and actually looking at a client's whole life, and as I say, more of a holistic thing, does it hold so much clout to be called an independent financial advisor? So I thought that was an interesting strand of argument, which if you want to read more detail, you have to go and read the cover feature. Basically, from the people she spoke to, and also from what I've heard from conversations I've had with advisors and others in the profession, some think they can achieve independence, maybe not in the regulatory sense, but independence in the round by being free from influence of providers and fund managers, etc. But then others believe it's just a pipe dream, and it's more about acknowledging that you're always going to have conflicts of interest, and it's how you manage those that matters. So that's about as much detail as I'm going to give on this podcast, but it's a very in-depth, it goes into a lot more depth than that, and you should definitely go and read it. And the cover image is brilliant.
Yes, can I claim credit for the cover image? You've explained the feature very well, Lois, but the cover, of course, is a couple of ants. No, 3 ants. Two walking in one direction, carrying a little sort of like green leaf, and the other one walking in the other direction, holding a red leaf.
You're actually wrong. It's 3 ants walking in one direction and 1 walking in the other.
I'm terribly sorry, but the point is still valid, which is that mostly ants walk in sort of little packs. I'm not sure that's the collective noun for ants, but this one ant standing out from the crowd.
Yeah.
Army of ant, quite right, or swarm or something, and this one ant is standing apart. But I suppose it communicates the whole idea of, as Lois says, what can any particular advisor be truly independent? I think I said in my editor's letter, the word independent is a bit like the word objective. It belongs slightly to an idealized world rather than the one that we actually inhabit. And as Lois says, we all carry our preconceptions and prejudices around with us, and this informs our daily interactions, sort of whether we like it or not. So, is the whole idea of independence a pipe dream, or does it really matter? Or, is it just a question of being aware of where you're coming from and taking account of that when you're giving advice? So I thought it was a really interesting, in-depth, deep dive, but very typical of Amanda. She spoke to a lot of people, got a lot of interesting perspectives. And yeah, like you, and like Lois, I thoroughly recommend it.
Yeah. No, I think the only reference I can think of is like being an independent or unpublished author, I guess. You're still going to need to find people to distribute with, and you're probably going to end up having people you prefer to work with. In those terms.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the other point that was made, which I thought was, I mean, it seems fairly obvious, but it's a good point. Obviously, as I said, this definition first came in 1986, and back then there were way fewer products and funds and things in the market, and now it's so much bigger. So it makes it almost impossible for an advisor to keep up with all the changes and new launches of products and things. So it's not really. I'd say it's impossible unless you literally spend every waking and sleeping moment looking into it, which maybe some of them do. I certainly wouldn't.
Or if there's an aggregator out there somewhere where you can like compare.
Yeah, I think there are.
That's an interesting. What might the role of AI be to tackle this in the future is an interesting one, because as Lois says, it's just impossible for most clients be whole of market nowadays, with the idea of, an advisor looking at what's available from scratch every single client who walks through the door. But maybe AI could play a role in that in the future. Who knows? It'd be one for a follow-up.
Yeah. I've seen some impressive things that it can do, but we'll see. People are still training it, so I don't know.
Only time will tell, Kim.
Only time will tell.
Our favourite phrase.
Our favourite phrase.
We're going to have to get it tattooed at some point. But Tom, what stood out for you in June?
Well, a couple of things, really. We had an interesting MM Meets interview with Ed Dymert, who is the CEO of Benchmark. He had a nice chat with our reporter, Darius McQuaid. And it was interesting. It started in quite an eccentric way, him talking about the way all the time he spends sort of traveling up and down on trains and in cars and what have you. And he originally did I think it was a degree in engineering or technical thing, and he's a big car man, and we use that as a careful metaphor, a cunning metaphor to describe how he's always on the move and always restless and never stands still for a few seconds. But he talks about his current role at Benchmark, the way it's growing and expanding at the moment. His history at Fidelity and other places, but it's a very interesting little sort of personal piece. And then I wrote a leader on Vietnam.
Yes,
which is not really. It's a sort of investment piece, which is not really sort of my usual patch. But I was just struck by the fact that more and more I was getting emails into my inbox saying, pay attention, mentioning Vietnam alongside China and other sort of, big economies as a kind of like a big sort of potential future emerging market and potential for investment. And I think certainly for someone of my age, whose memories of Vietnam and of sort of Southeast Asia in general is very much that sort of immediate post-Vietnam War world where, you had countries that had been really badly traumatized by the war and had been taken over by sort of a communist or authoritarian governments. These were the last places you would think of as kind of like great opportunities for sort of investment. But Vietnam has really, really kind of expanded, like really ever since the economic reforms of the mid-'80s. It's become this kind of like very, very accelerated sort of emerging market, through all kinds of reforms that happened in the 1990s, the removal of the US embargo, the engagement of organizations such as the World Bank and the IMF, huge industrial and manufacturing growth. It's I think something like 60% of Samsung's smartphones are now made in Vietnamese factories.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things, a bit like China, it's nominally sort of, held onto its kind of like communist stroke socialist government, but while at the same time almost surreptitiously undergoing these big sort of free market sort of reforms. So it's economically or politically where it sits is a bit of a sort of a Frankenstein's monster. But I talked to a chap called Dominic Scriven, who is founder of a group called Dragon Capital, and he actually lives in Ho Chi Minh City. That's where I talked to him from.
Mhm.
And he was talking at length about Vietnam's transformation, particularly the sort of like the growth of its investor base and what he regards as its imminent classification as an emerging market. It's an official classification, both of which will massively attract further investment. I mean, obviously he's got skin in the game, so he would say that, wouldn't he? But he had a lot of interesting things to say about Vietnam's past and its future. So it was a bit of a sort of left field thing for us to sort of cover, but I just wanted to give a sort of a general overview of the country, because as I say, I kept seeing it mentioned, but it was much kind of like filling in my own sort of like gaps in knowledge about that particular area that I wanted to
Also,
investigate
apparently,
a bit more.
Vietnam great for a gap year. So I'm told.
That too, not necessarily
I think
a reason. To
also
invest in
because
it,
it's so easy to go between Vietnam and Cambodia. People love to do that.
Absolutely.
But apart from that, it's also great for investment. And I find it really interesting, and it's one of the things that excites me about the future, to see most of these emerging markets growing. And I see a future where, like, in 100 years, the countries that are seen as like third world countries or emerging markets, I see them being the ones at the top, and then it being flipped. But yeah,
but I think what
it's my
really
dystopian fantasy.
Well, only time will tell, Kim. But no. I think what's really interesting about the I mean, Cambodia is another example. You're talking about a country whose economy and political system completely collapsed in the mid-70s, and under the Khmer Rouge, I think it's something like a third of the population was murdered or something like that. It's the most appalling genocide you can possibly imagine. But paradoxically, it's this very trauma, and Vietnam as well. This very traumatizing sort of experience is what sort of laid the foundations for the resurgence of that region, because it did cement this kind of desire for kind of continuity and predictability and stability. Once you've gone through a situation like that, albeit it's not the nicest regime you would like, and from a human rights perspective, it's very problematic. Nonetheless, it was this absolute determination of like we can't go through this again that has laid a lot of the foundations for this.
And I feel like those changes are happening everywhere. Look at Kenya.
What's it like if the regime's not good? What's it like from an ESG perspective, investing in a market like that?
Well, I would suspect not great.
Not the E. Definitely not the E.
No. Because communist governments don't distinguish for themselves in their environmental credentials, but
But I think you have to. I don't want to get the environment. I don't want to make the environmentalists hate me, but I think you have to. I think you have to give some of these countries leeway, because, like, the Industrial Revolution happened here. Like 100-ish years ago, less.
Longer.
I don't know. Longer. Okay. 150 years ago. Okay. I'm not very good at dates and math. But and those countries didn't have that.
No.
So I feel like that's where they are now. So there's a potential that 150 years which I know maybe the Earth doesn't have that much time for people to catch up, but there could be a future in which, some Cambodian scientist or Vietnamese scientist create something that revolutionizes everything, or a Western scientist, I don't know, but something will be revolutionized to maybe change things and change the way we currently create energy and consume it.
Well, you would certainly hope so, because you at this stage that probably looks like the only real solution for the climate sort of emergency. But it's true what you say. I mean, from the perspective of a lot of these countries, they sort of say, well, you countries in the West industrialized, grew incredibly wealthy and massively boosted your standard of living as a result of fossil fuel technology, and now you're turning around to all of us and say, well, you're not allowed to do the same. So you can get where they're coming from that point of view, but it doesn't unfortunately change the reality of climate change.
I do. I do understand. I just hope they don't have to go through 150 years of
I don't think it'll be that long, but yeah. Anyway, is there anything else that you guys wanted to talk about from June? I'm looking at our top 10 stories, and the top story was, I'm going to redo that. Tenet Group has appointed administrators, which resulted in 95 jobs being cut in Leeds. Is that a common theme that's happening with Tenet this year? What is going on at Tenet?
Without wanting to enrage whoever used to work at Tenet, yes, we could see it coming for a long time.
Yeah.
But one strand or one part of their business which didn't go into administration was called Tenet Compliance Services, or TCS, and they were just bought by like a big advisory business called TFAS. And what Tenet Compliance Services do is help, because in networks you have, I don't have to explain this to advisors, but I'm going to anyway. In networks, you have appointed representatives, but obviously if you're an advice business and you want to be independent, then you set up directly authorized. So what TCS does is, I suppose, sort of consult and help appointed representatives who want to go DA, directly authorized. And so TFAS has bought them now, and they're going to call them TFAS Compliance Services and continue doing the same thing. So that's a good news story to have come out of all the Tenet mess.
There's some positives in there.
But yes, Tenet as a network is, well, it had already it had already got rid of its network, and all the appointed reps have gone to open work, and I cannot remember the other one. Sorry, other one. Go and look at the news story. Another network.
LSL.
Maybe.
Yeah. No, that's what it says. The transferred its parts to LSL and Open Work Partnership.
There you go. LSL.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, St. James's Place SJP was relegated from the FTSE 100. Oh
man.
Yes, I was rather awkwardly having lunch with someone from SJP on the day that happened, and he was reasonably sort of sanguine about it. I mean, he wasn't. I got the impression he didn't want me to talk about it too much, but yes, it was a bit of a, not surprising, you would say. The writing was slightly on the wall, given all the sort of like shenanigans that's gone on with them recently, and the sort of and the bad press and what have you. But he was, pretty sort of pleased with the sort of future direction that the firm was going in. But as I say, he wasn't the most impartial witness on to that, I would say.
He's not going to be like, this is where we went wrong. And well, they could. I think if you did that, if you went, this is where we went wrong and this is what we're doing to fix it, that's always an encouraging message from a leader or someone that you're putting your massive amounts of money into. So.
I mean, I think they have a reputational problem at the moment, sort of like certainly within the sector, and I think the problem with reputations is they take a lot of time to shift
and rebuild.
It was Mark. I think it was Mark Twain. Should we quote some Mark Twain?
Go
Heighten
ahead.
the tone of this.
If you want to do it word verbatim,
he said, he said that if you give a man a reputation as an early riser, he can sleep until noon. So, you know, ultimately people are judged by their reputation rather than the reality, which is not necessarily to let SJP off the hook. But once it's got this, you know, the reputation that it has, it's hard, even if it does things right, it can be hard for people will judge it through the lens of its reputation a bit.
Yeah.
And I think maybe people judge SJP in one set of criteria, maybe they don't with the others. This is something that my predecessor as editor Katie Pigden said, I think, in one of her last leaders. So are we being too harsh on SJP? And as I recall, there was a storm of comments online saying no,
she
we're
was
not.
like, I want to be empathetic, guys.
It's true. I mean, yeah, there are some issues there, but I do think you're right. Now, every single thing they do is, if it's good, it's like, oh, well, they're only doing that for their own benefit. And if it's bad, then it's like, oh, so bad.
Yeah, I think when you kind of reach that Goliath status, people don't really have many positive things to say about you.
Yeah, they certainly couldn't be called the underdog.
No. Okay, so let's look ahead. July. Let's talk about the July issue, and then afterwards we can talk a little bit more about other events happening in July. So what can we look forward to seeing in the July issue, Tom?
Well, we did a cover version. No, we didn't. That's what bands do.
Of what song?
Yeah, Strawberry Fields Forever. We all joined in. No, we did a cover feature about. It was basically a shopping list, a list of essentials for the next government. Because you may have noticed there's an election going on at the moment, and which will be concluded. I'm not sure when this is going out, but we're recording it.
We're recording end of June, but I am going to release it before the election.
All right, so it'll be right on top of us. But basically, July the 4th, we were having an election. Labour is very much predicted to win by a landslide. But putting that to one side, it's all about what could the next government do in terms of the financial advice sector? What are the key shopping list items, things that people within the sector have been calling for ages? And the idea is not so much to sort of reinvent the wheel. It's much more, what simple things, what's the low-hanging fruit, what's like one proposal in each section, be it regulation, pensions, ISAs, and there's a fourth one which I've forgotten now.
Regulation, pensions,
tax. That's right. Excuse me. Tax, pensions, regulation, and ISAs. What would the financial advice sector want the next government to do, whatever its colour, in those particular areas? So it's not a party political piece, really. It's a kind of practical, sensible, common sense sort of piece. We each did a section. I did a section on ISAs, which people will not be surprised to know concluded with the whole idea of the ISA situation has just become incredibly complicated because
there's so many.
There are so many, and people just use them for sort of like for not just for to encourage saving, but as kind of almost as a political signal. Like we got the UK ISA last year, which is a kind of like look, we want to boost investment in UK PLC and all this kind of stuff, and it's been largely savaged by the industry, potentially unfairly, but a lot of you don't get many voices defending it. But there've been lots of other examples too, and it's almost like it's almost like a series of kind of wetted knots, like sort of shoelace knot tied on top of each other, and sort of untangling it sort of becomes. It's very difficult once these things become entrenched, and to simplify the system. But what the industry has been calling for years is, can we just have a simplified single ISA product that's transparent, and that will help boost investment, boost savings. So we talked briefly about how that might come about, and what might be the route to get there. So I did that, and I think, Lois, you did a bit on pensions.
Yes. Sorry, I was just going to say,
you've been obsessed with pensions lately.
I did just write a weekend essay on pensions.
You did,
You
yeah.
did.
Basically a brain dump that I wrote in about an hour. Shouldn't admit that. About my own pension situation. And I'm quite obsessive about checking that I'm going to have enough and stuff. And I still don't think I'm going to have enough. But it's still very difficult to know. I suppose I've got 35 years still. So hopefully I'll save enough.
I'm too much like that Chris Budd thing where I can't see, but I really can't see the future. I can't see where we're going, where we're headed, and whether it will be relevant still, you know?
I know. I have a weird thing though where I can see obviously my present self, and actually I can sort of visualize myself after retirement, but everything in between is a bit muddy. But in terms of the pension sector's hope for after the election, though, for the next government, a few key things. So there's this whole thing about pension adequacy. So obviously auto-enrollment has largely been considered to have been a success because loads more people are now saving into pension. I can't remember the stats exactly, but a lot more people are now saving into a private pension scheme because they it's an opt-out rather than an opt-in. So obviously workplace just auto-enrolls you. But I personally am a bit concerned, and I think others are too, that maybe stops people from engaging with their pensioners or makes it less likely they're going to engage because they just think, oh, well, I've been put on a pension, so I'm fine. But what they're actually put on, which I think is minimum 8%, is not enough for most people they're not saving enough per month. What they should be doing is upping their contributions. And I said in my weekend essay, my dad's always drilled that into me, but not everyone has that. They just assume it's fine. And also
I think we've talked about it before where most people aren't aware of their pension. They'll get that letter when they start their job at the beginning, now that everyone's on auto-enrollment, and then they'll be like, oh, okay, cool. And then that's it. And then all you see, maybe you might see it on your pay slip and go, oh, yeah, it's going out. Oh, that's how much. But apart from that, they don't really.
It also, the minimum age it starts is currently 22. So some companies, including Phoenix Group, are calling for it to be put down to 18 and for the minimum salary threshold to be removed so that whatever you're earning, you get put on a pension. So from 18 and whatever you're earning. I mean, you can opt out.
That part-timer working at McDonald's will want to start contributing.
I do. Yeah, it's interesting you say you can opt out. I do wonder I think it would certainly make people positively engage a little bit more if that change came in, but maybe or engage in the sense of, well, I'm going to opt out if that's what I have to do.
But then at least if they've done that, then they're thinking, but I'll opt in when I'm earning more, hopefully.
No.
Maybe. I think they might just think, well, it'll allow me to hold on to more of my money. And I want to keep it like that. This is, I think, the real conundrum that, yes, the whole idea of auto-enrollment it's a passive thing, and it means that people, it's just they're not thinking about it, but at least they are saving into a pension. It may not be adequate, but, you might hope that as time goes on and they get a bit older, they might engage with it a bit more as long as it's in place. But if they opt out right at the start, they might never engage in it. It's an interesting behavioural thing. I know you're keen on behaviourism. This whole thing.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with Ken Scott from Royal London, and we were talking about, retirement planning, but at different life stages, and how, when you're younger, you should be engaged more with it and be more adventurous, as in like you're investing in higher risk, because you can do that. And then as you get older, you get more safer, and then you want to do your drawdown. But then he was also saying that not a lot of people consider care costs. And as someone who has, family who work in nursing homes, and I've seen that kind of firsthand, how expensive it is insane. And I always wonder, how are these people affording? I mean, most of the people that I came across when I was working in a nursing home, they had their children, or most of them actually sold their houses. And then that kind of took care of that bill for as long as they lived. But thinking about our generation and how difficult it is for us to purchase houses already. How many will actually own a house when they reach retirement? And will their pension, if they're not engaging with that pension, their pension might not cover the cost of care if it's £1,000 a week.
Oh, it's a massive problem, and the problem is that no government has an answer to it, or has even grappled with it as a problem. Well, I also think, I'm going back to the behavioural thing, I think it's quite a difficult thing for people, even with means or assets, to grapple with, to envisage their parents in that position. They don't like to think about it. They like to think of their parents as these people who are these kind of autonomous people who've always kind of like sort of been there, or been the persons who've taken care of you when you were younger and stuff. And they don't like thinking of them as helpless or incapacitated or anything like that. And I think a lot of people would rather just forget about that, or not engage in it, or not. I mean, just speaking personally, we my parents are in their 80s and they're still perfectly healthy and independent, but we just put in place a power of attorney, which would allow us to sort of take control, should we need to, of their control of their money. And I remember just feeling a bit sort of queasy about it, a bit kind of, I don't like this. I don't like the idea of this, even though
really, my parents are in their 60s and they've already done that.
Yeah, well, but your parents sound ultra engaged and organized. It must be
my mum's always been on it. I think she brought it up with me, like when her and my dad separated, and she was like, "This is where my files are if anything happens." And I was like, "I am a child. Leave me alone. You're gonna be here forever."
Just throw your rattle.
But now I understand. But now I understand having, I think Katie previously wrote a weekend essay about when she lost her dad, and having to go through all those documents and trying to find them and stuff like that. And it does make it easier going through something like that, knowing, we already have the checklist, everything's sorted, rather than you're going through something traumatic and sad and then also having to scramble and figure all these things out from scratch. So it's not something nice to think about, but you'll be grateful that you sorted it out, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But to bring it up, is there anything else in July that you guys wanted to talk about before, or do you just want to dive into election chat?
Well, sorry, Les.
You can go first if you'd like, Tom.
No, do go ahead. I was going to dive into election chat, but if you have anything else you wish to talk about.
I wanted to talk about the leader I wrote in July, because I thought it was for July, because I thought it was quite a, I'm not going to say interesting, because I'm doing that thing again where I'm
timely
saying it. Timely, fascinating. So all three of us are going to have brought up Katie now. So hi, Katie. Katie and I were having a chat about, because the advice guidance boundary review.
Yes.
Obviously a massive thing for advisors. But Katie mentioned, and I thought it was a good point, that maybe advice might not be the right word for what advisors do. And maybe guidance would be a more fitting term, because sort of colloquial or in everyday vernacular, if you're talking about advising, if you give someone advice, it's like there and they can take it or leave it. Whereas if you giving them guidance, you're sort of guiding them. It seems more hands-on. And so that made me think,
are they not synonyms? They're kind of synonyms.
They are, but they have slightly different connotations.
Because you can try and guide me, but I can still be like, nah.
Yeah, I know you don't. Yeah, it's not like forcing you, but it just seems a bit more hands-on. So I wrote my leader not just about those two terms, but just about whether advice even is the right term for advice, or whether it should be called something else. And I remember it brought back memories of an article I wrote, I think last year, or maybe even the year before, when Next Wealth wrote up a report looking at people who are client-facing in advice firms, calling themselves advisors versus calling themselves planners.
Yeah, I think planners is better.
Planners is because, as I say in my leader, the CII's qualification is they call it financial planning. And when I was talking about the cover feature, I was saying about this holistic financial planning that we're moving towards, away from just sort of advising on products. So I just think it's, I didn't really make a really strong conclusion in the leader, but if you don't believe me, you can go and read it.
Make your own decision.
Time will tell. It doesn't quite work there. But yeah, no, it's a bit of an interesting debate, I thought.
I think planner is better though, because someone can give you a plan. Again, I guess that's the same as guidance or advice. You can choose to follow it or not.
Well, I know, but I mean, advisors don't force clients to make decisions, so it shouldn't be like financial enforcers or anything like that.
Maybe they should create financial enforcers.
Financial hitmen.
Yeah. So someone can get us all in shape and good financial shape.
Financial PT. Anyway, just these are
there's someone out there who has an Instagram handle calling themselves the Financial PT.
PT, definitely. I'm going to look it up after this.
But anyway,
let's get into politics if you want.
Let's get into the politics. Yay. So what has the reaction been? Is there anticipation? Is there trepidation? What is it?
Well, a sort of a mixture of,
or is it just nothing?
It's such a weird mixture of emotions that this election. It's felt incredibly unreal. Partly because it's a snap election, so it kind of took everyone by surprise. Everyone was kind of caught with their trousers down, including Rishi Sunak, by even though he was the one who called it.
Especially Rishi Sunak.
Rishi Sunak. But it seems extraordinary that he was obviously mulling over this decision, and it looks like he's just winging it badly. From
a marketing perspective as well, if you know, I'm about to announce I'm doing this, and then what I've seen him put out in terms of just like marketing has just been lackluster. Like it's almost like the people who are working with him don't know who he is, and they're trying to make him something he's not.
Yeah, it is awkward because I don't think he's the most talented sort of like politician when it comes to being being the sort of PR person and pressing the flesh and things like that. But I did a weekend essay about the election campaign, and I just was saying that it just seemed like a bit of a car crash so far, particularly for Rishi Sunak. And bear in mind, I wrote that before the whole, D-Day debacle. So he was doing badly even before then. But I basically just said that a lot of people, there's a real lack of enthusiasm in it. And I think it's slightly reflected in the polls that, that Labour are doing incredibly well, but it's largely because people have decisively turned again. Yeah, they really get fed up with the Tories and they're determined to get them out. But I mean, there's been this huge prediction of a massive, massive landslide, but for Labour, which I'm just not totally convinced about, because I think there is still a huge amount of don't knows that don't show up in the opinion polls, and all of the smaller parties like Reform or the Greens or Lib Dem or what have you, they're all doing well, in terms of hoovering up dissatisfied votes from the left or the right or what have you. So where all those ultimately do break, and in what constituencies they go to, and where the don't knows go, I think it's just incredibly unpredictable. So I think this election, has been weird and boring and strange up until now.
Boring.
But I think it could be very interesting on election night. So I, for one, am definitely staying up for the election because I genuinely don't know what the result will be. I'm pretty sure Labour will win, but to what extent? I think it's very up for grabs.
I stopped staying up for stuff like that after Brexit. I was just like, I'm happy to sleep through things and find out what the result is the next day. Because
never stayed up for stuff like that.
I mean, yeah,
it's just your anxiety is not good.
No, I love it. I'm just a political junkie. Although I found out the other day, Lois just dropped this bomb that you absolutely hated politics. And I was like, I had no idea. I've been talking to you for politics since I joined the magazine.
I don't mind if you talk to me about it. I hate all the farce around it and everything.
Okay.
I know some people love the drama, but I think it's stupid when it's messing with people's lives.
Yeah.
See, I like to talk about politics in the way that I would talk about the storyline of a TV show. Their characters, their caricatures of reality. I know, like you're saying, it does affect real people's lives.
Yeah.
But if I don't do that, then I'd just be angry and I have nowhere to put that anger. So.
Like my dad takes everything. Well, it was Donald Trump before everything Donald Trump. I mean, none of us like Donald Trump, but my dad took it personally, every single thing that he said.
Yeah.
And now it's moved on to Rishi Sunak. Every time I go back there to see my parents now, my dad goes off on a rant about the latest thing he's done, which is just hilarious. Personally,
my dad used to be like that with both Trump and now with Rishi, but now he just likes to find funny memes or dumb stuff that they've done or someone editing them in some way, and then he'll send it to me and be like, look at this idiot. And I think that's helping him cope.
I had a dream about Donald Trump last night.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry.
God.
It wasn't a dodgy dream.
No, I was just gonna be like,
get your minds out the gutter.
I would be calling up a therapist. I'd be looking and saying, I don't know why this is happening.
I know why it is. It's because I mentioned, so I put into ChatGPT, and we're doing these ChatGPT experiments at the moment. I tried to get it to write something in my voice by putting in a weekend essay that I'd written. And as I said, oh no, I haven't published it anywhere. It started psychoanalyzing me before I'd even given it a prompt, which was quite amusing because it was my weekend essay about the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I did give it a prompt, I said, write an opinion piece about whether Donald Trump is a good leader in the voice of the article above, or words to that effect. I can't remember exactly how I worded it.
Mm-hmm.
And it got really confused and just started talking about what kind of leader Donald Trump would be at the end of the world.
See, it's fundamentally misunderstood your instruction, hasn't it? It's sort of like just trying to insert your worldview rather than your tone. Not that zombie apocalypse is your worldview exactly.
Well,
I think that's called. It starts having hallucinations. That's what that is.
Yeah.
It'll just come up with its own story if it doesn't understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I think if I tried harder and put in lots of samples and stuff, maybe it could do it. I hope not, though, because it would be very disconcerting if it could write in my voice.
I don't think it would remember, though. That's the only thing. It doesn't have continuity.
Back to the election.
Damn it.
All I was going to say, on the election is it's not a massively original point, but I think if Labour, if the polls are right and Labour win a sort of like a 240 seat majority and the Tories are reduced to sort of 60 seats or something, that is absolutely seismic in terms of the political landscape in this country, how this country will be governed for the next 5 years. The Labour Party will essentially have carte blanche to do anything it wants. And from a financial advice sector, from a financial advice perspective, it will be genuinely interesting. It's like, if it can do anything, will it massively move the dial on a lot of things that we've been discussing? Or will it carry on being very, very cautious as it has been so far in the campaign? How radical could it be?
In its manifesto, it did mention a review of the entire pensions landscape. And I think I haven't read every single manifesto, but I think it's the only one that did say it was going to do that.
But not many governments, I mean, in the history of the world, let alone in this country, have such a massive freedom of movement, freedom of action, if that's the majority they end up with. And they're not going to have that for more than a parliament, I don't think. So they'd be very, very keen to spend that political capital as quickly as possible, I think.
Yeah. I think maybe that's the strategy, is not really say exactly what they have or what they're doing, because they're letting the other side show their asses. So then they can just swoop in and then be like, this is what we're doing, this. Well, that's what I hope, is that on day one, they're like, actually, we've had this plan.
The mask is ripped off.
Yeah. And hopefully it's not like an awful plan. Like, actually, everyone's work lives are going to be worse and we're going to tax you way more. And we're getting rid of auto enrollment.
Well, only time will tell, Kim.
Only time will tell. And we're bringing back the LTA.
Oh, yeah. That will really get people defecating in the Thames, I think. You can take that out if you want.
We'll start revolting like the French. That's amazing. But yeah, I think we've talked at length about everything. And I really enjoyed having this conversation with you. both. And I hope that we can pick this up again after the election and see whether our predictions were right or wrong. I don't know.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.